Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this meeting of the Randwick Local Planning Panel. Before I commence the meeting further, can I acknowledge, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today and also pay respects to elders past and present. To introduce the panel that will consider the matters before the panel this afternoon, Gary West is my name. I'm the chair of the panel, and we're supported by expert members, Cara Craston to my left and Sandra Robinson to my far right, and community representative is Mayor Margaret Shah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 6 items for consideration this afternoon, and each of the panel members were requested to, at the commencement of the meeting, to indicate and sign a declaration of interest in relation to these matters. I can confirm that no declarations of interest in relation to these matters were declared by members. Any further declarations that need to be made? No further declarations. We have a number of people who've registered to speak. The order in which I will take them will be councillors first, then objector, then the applicant. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the panel. However, an extension of 1 minute may be granted upon request. The panel's been provided with copies of all of the submissions, and I might say 1 or 2 of them there's been quite a number of late submissions, and the panel has read and seen all of those. It's important that when people are addressing the panel that you focus on those aspects that you wish us to understand and to consider in our deliberations later this afternoon. The applicant, of course, may also wish to comment on matters that have been raised in Council's report. After each speaker, panel members may request further information from those speakers. Only registered speakers will be allowed to speak this afternoon. Please refrain from using a defamatory or offensive language as it's not appropriate. This meeting is being recorded, and the audio will be available on Council's website by tomorrow afternoon. It's important that every speaker, when you come to either the lectern or my colleagues here, that you turn the microphone on and state your name for the recording. I think that's all the preliminary work. The first matter before the panel is a development application for 68 Beach Street. I have Craig Bell, an objector, registered to speak. Craig.
Yeah, Craig Bell here. I am an owner of 70 Beach Street, which lies on the southern boundary of 68 Beach Street. The original plan of the applicant was to flatten the sandstone on the northern part of our property. In that context, a geotechnical report was prepared by Morrow in October 2018. We then established that part of the sandstone was on our property. Morrow provided another report dated 9 September 2019, which I'll call GR, with recommendations, and the council has accepted those recommendations, which support the excavation of sandstone, leaving a blade of sandstone on the northern side of only 700 millimetres wide. However, we question whether those recommendations are based on a comprehensive geotechnical analysis, thereby putting the integrity of the sandstone wall in doubt. Questions we have are as follows. The GR, which is the September 2019 report, is in fact a letter from Morrow dated 9 September 2019, and is not a comprehensive geotechnical report. It is a comment rather than an opinion. Morrow was simply asked to comment on the proposal in the developer's amended plan to excavate 400 millimetres from the boundary. They were not asked to provide an independent opinion on how to ensure the stability of the sandstone wall. They have not undertaken an extensive assessment of the sandstone wall. They based their comments on the current proposed plans, the survey, and what they had been told by the applicant. They conclude the stability of the existing, inverted commas, the stability of the existing rock wall may be maintained if the basement excavation is set back 400 millimetres or more from the southern boundary. The lack of certainty raises concerns that the proposed excavation does not ensure the integrity of the sandstone wall. So it's quite concerning that the DAR has simply relied on the comments made in the GR and adopted them as recommendations. We're extremely concerned that the sandstone wall will become so unstable during the development that it will collapse or will require demolition. Therefore, we submit that an independent, detailed geotechnical report and engineering report should be obtained prior to the approval of the DA making recommendations in relation to the appropriate excavation, setback and preservation of the sandstone wall. So we don't think that the recommendations are sufficient at this stage. Second point, solar access. We do not currently have compliant solar access, and this is supported by the shadowing diagrams. On the 21st of June, our north-facing windows do not have any sunlight. As we can establish that we currently do not receive compliant solar access, the new development cannot reduce the solar access further,
Right.
but it does.
Craig, do you need an extension just to finish that off?
So we object to that, and that's in our submissions, February 2019 and May 2019. And finally, the DEP requested further amendments. This did not occur as it was felt by the council that the amendments had adequately raised the concerns by the DEP. We believe the initial concerns of the DEP should be adequately addressed by amended plans and proposed conditions.
Okay. Yeah, no, Craig, I did say that, do you want an extension, but...
That's fine.
That's okay. I got your message. Yeah, thank you. We might have some questions in a moment after we hear from the applicant. David Waghorn, is David here? Yes, David.
Just close this one. I'll flip it, yeah. Oh, good, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr Chair and panel members. My name is David Waghorn. I'm from Planning Ingenuity here representing the applicant for this DA. In general, our client is happy with the recommendation for approval and seeks the panel's endorsement for recommendation, with the exception of condition 2A, which seeks the reduction of the building in height by 1.4 metres. We seek this condition be deleted, and we'll discuss the reasons why. From our understanding, in the assessment report, this condition is primarily required to ensure compliance with the wall height control by reducing the floor-to-floor heights of the first floor and the second floor level. Whilst we understand the issues raised in the assessment report, we do not think the assessment report has considered the amenity of our client's property and the resultant impacts on our clients for a 1.4 metre height reduction. The building has been designed in this way for two primary reasons. The first one, where the surfaces are not required between the ceiling and the floor slab, the intention is to have a higher ceiling height to maximise the light and solar access for the residents. And secondly, the higher floor-to-floor heights will maximise our clients' views from the apartments from the first and second floor level. In terms of the wall height non-compliance, it is only the front portion of the second floor level that does not comply with the 8 metre requirement. We say that the variation to this 8 metre wall height control is satisfied because of the following reasons. One, the second floor level, or the uppermost level, is set back from the front and side boundaries, and it is also set back from the level below. So it does not read as a sheer 3-storey element or an unarticulated element, rather that it provides visual interest and some modulation. Two, the breach to the wall height can be attributed to the sloping topography and the high floor-to-floor heights in order to maximise the light, ventilation and views I discussed previously. And finally, the proposal complies with the height, FSR and setback requirements, and it is generally of a built form that could be reasonably anticipated by the applicable planning controls. In terms of the amenity impacts caused by the variation to this wall height control, we say that the variation will have no adverse impact on the privacy of adjoining properties when subject to condition 2. The proposal satisfies council's solar access requirements as detailed in the assessment report, and the proposal as submitted will, at worst, in our opinion, only result in a minor impact on existing views. In terms of views, the applicant has provided a comparative analysis, which I'll go through in a second, and has compared the amount of view loss with the proposal as submitted to the proposal as conditioned. We say that there is only a minor change. Given the proposal complies with the relevant building envelope controls and height in relation to FSR and setbacks,
You need an
probably need
extension?
about 30 seconds more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, panel. There must be a reasonable level of expectation that some views and solar access will be lost, especially given the topography and the change in levels between the subject site and number 70 of 6 to 7 metres. In our opinion, the amount of view gained by the 1.4 metre reduction to one apartment at 119 Arden Street would be disproportionate to the amount of view lost from the first and second floor levels of our client's apartment. We are of the opinion the proposal complies with the relevant building envelope controls and will have no adverse impact on the amenity of adjoining properties. We therefore seek your support in the deletion of condition 2A, but are happy to accept the remainder of the conditions.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up on a question, as you heard Mr. Bell question the issue relating to the geotechnical report and not really being, it's a letter, not a report. Could you throw some further light on that for us, please?
Mr. Chair, in terms of the geotechnical report, we have submitted as much detail as we possibly could given the site constraints to Council, and Council have agreed with our geotechnical report conclusions that the sandstone wall, it is feasible to retain the sandstone wall and it is feasible to maintain the stability of our site and any adjoining properties. We do acknowledge that there are a number of conditions in the assessment report, I think it was condition 22, that asks us for a more detailed geotechnical report to happen prior to CC. We will be undertaking that.
And I also note that condition 6 require, in accordance with that report, details of the methodology of excavation works and construction works shall be prepared by a qualified engineer, and that report is to be submitted to the PCA and to Council.
And we are happy to comply with those conditions.
Okay. All right. Questions from other panel members? Yes.
Your comment about the compliance with controls and that the extra floor-to-floor height it's not relevant to, there's no planning issues that arise. Would you agree that extra floor-to-floor height, you've got 3.8 metres floor-to-floor, adds to the bulk of the building?
In terms of the bulk, I think it's a unique site because of its location at the top of what I think we'll call a quarry. It has a unique outcome, and regardless of compliance with the controls or not, it is going to read very differently to the buildings to the south.
But the building does become bigger with that. I mean, 3.1 would be the sort of standard floor-to-floor, so you've got an extra 700 per level.
It would, and as I was saying, in terms of the way it was designed, we're looking to try and maximise the amenity of our units because we've done analysis that shows that there really is a minor impact on adjoining properties by having a building of this scale. To me, the reduction by 1.4 metres will not really change the perception of the bulk and scale of the building because it is perched on top of the quarry.
One other question, or two other questions, sorry. The pedestrian entry is on Beach Street is far from clear. You go through a metal gate and you're straight into the basement car park. What might be done to make that a more pleasing place of arrival? Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of the change in levels between the street and the actual entry, there is not a lot that the applicant can actually do with providing a level and accessible pedestrian entrance from that point. That's why we've made the decision to provide a combined pedestrian and vehicular entrance, but indicate through line marking and walls a level of separation between the two.
Okay. Okay, I'll let someone else ask some questions.
Yes, okay.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of the addendum geotechnical report where they provided further comment and recommendations with respect to the sandstone rock face, was a site inspection carried out by the geotechnical engineer as part of that addendum report, not the original one when they came back out to look at the specific issue and the recommendations? It's just a lot of reports do mention when a site inspection has been undertaken, and I don't think that one did. So I'm just wondering, were they, in terms of providing that specific advice, just relying on their assessment of the plans and the briefing from the architect, or did they also go back out and examine the wall?
I'm being instructed by the owner and applicant that, yes, there was a site inspection undertaken and there was physical assessment undertaken on site. Yes, and that's what I said, a more detailed assessment will be undertaken post-consent prior to construction.
Okay. I've also got a question to do with the elevations and just wanting to clarify the treatment to the windows on the north and south elevation. You'd be aware, sorry, I don't have the actual conditions up, but you'd be aware of the draft condition L and K, or J and K deal with the balcony and the windows, and condition K talks about that the windows having to have a maximum sill height of 1.6 metres above floor level, or alternatively they're to be fixed and provided with translucent obscure glazing for particular windows of a certain height. I'm just wanting to understand, because the elevations, it doesn't specify, but it does look like they could potentially be louvers. Is it intended that they are to be louvers? And because if so, then obviously you've got a condition that requires something different to that. So I'm just wanting to understand the architectural intent and proposal there.
The architectural intention of the northern and southern elevations is effectively a 1.5 metre high wall is what we're proposing, to effectively lead the eye away from looking down over the adjoining properties. So you'd be looking out. So in terms of the condition, we would need to comply with that condition. We would be raising the sill height by some 100 millimetres. In addition to that privacy requirement, there are some louvers that are provided there, just to provide any additional screening for privacy for adjoining property owners, just to complement
So
the
just so
design
that I
solution.
can clarify that I've understood that correctly. So if we take, say, the kitchen and the lounge room windows, then we can't see from, if you look at the elevation, it's just like a black, looks like a black louver.
Yes.
Are you saying from what you've just indicated that behind that screen, it's got a sill height of 1.5 metres and then the windows above? Is that correct, or is...
I'll take you to an elevation here that I have here. In this location from, just say the top level, from the floor slab to the sill of the window is 1.5 metres.
Right.
And then you've got these louvers that will be above that sill
Okay.
height.
Thank you for that. No further questions, but I do have a question of the adjoining property owner.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Bell, could you come back, please? I think we've got a question that maybe we want to direct it to you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd just like to understand, when I'm looking at the shadow diagrams, the elevation shadow diagrams onto your property, I'm just wanting to understand what's the use of the rooms where there's two windows that are shown as currently obtaining some sunlight, which would be overshadowed by the proposal. So one is right up the top, and then one is on the level below towards the beach street frontage.
So they're all north.
They're both on the north side. I'm just
Yeah.
wanting to understand what's the use of those rooms.
Oh, they're living rooms, the bottom ones, and the top one is a bedroom.
So all of the north-facing windows on the bottom floor, that's all a living
That's
room?
right, it's all living areas. So the bedrooms are on the southern side, so
Right.
on the ground floor. Those bedrooms are on the southern side. And on the next level, or the extension up the top, there's a bedroom on the north side and a bedroom on the south side,
Okay.
and then a bedroom on the west side facing Arden Street that way.
Okay.
So the northern side on the bottom level, on the ground level, is all living area. Yeah.
Okay. And all of those are in shadow at the moment, with the exception of the one towards the frontage of the site, which gets some sun by the look of the shadow diagrams in the morning.
Well, on the 21st of June, it certainly doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we also noticed on the site inspection that you have some skylights on that northern side. So just wanting to understand from an overlooking perspective, what is the use of the room? Is that over the living room as well then? If those...
That's right. There's a living area, kitchen area.
Right.
With that, quite large one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
right.
a living area.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. We'll certainly take into account all the submissions that have been put to us today. Just to also note that we did have a late submission from Mr. Preston, who lives at 66 Beach Street, and in relation to access onto the Beach Lane and double opening doors, gates. They were shown on the plans as opening outwards, but the conditions actually say that they are to open inwards. So I think that addresses that point, but we did look at that today. But anyway, thank you very much for your submissions.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next matter is 1038 to 1040 Anzac Parade, Maroubra. We have Samantha Burke, who's registered to address the panel.
This is on already? Oh, press it.
I just have to press the button there. That's it. That's it.
We're on, okay.
Introduce yourself. Yep.
Samantha Burke. I'm a local resident. So thank you. So I'm here today to address the panel as a representative of the local residents. As you know, there's already been a considerable reaction to from the local community to the build of this boarding house, with over 60 written objections received by the council in April of this year. While we, as the residents, acknowledge that there have been some amends to the original plans in response to those objections, the consensus of the local residents is that the changes are not significant enough to overcome the concerns that were raised. These objections continue to be driven by the oversized scale of the building and how this compares to the neighbouring properties, which all share common boundaries. There's also concern that with the nature of the building, the number of short-term residents that would reside there. So we feel that with 50 to 60 residents occupying the lot, which is over 10 times that which it currently holds, there would be considerable knock-on effects with relation to the traffic and noise. It's our belief that no fewer than 6 to 8 neighbouring blocks will be significantly affected from a visual outlook, privacy and acoustic perspective from the plans. One of the biggest concerns to the immediate neighbouring residents is that because there's going to be windows and balconies facing on all sides of the building, the occupants of the boarding house will be able to look directly into the gardens, living rooms and bedrooms of those living on Anzac Parade and on the properties behind Winchester Avenue. These concerns of invasion of privacy still withstand, even though there have been some amendments made to the most recent plans. We'd ask the council to work with the developer to build properties that are more in keeping with the residential community and provide longer-term affordable housing, such as townhouses. We believe a smaller build of this nature would ensure that the building work itself would be overall less impactful, but it also might allow some of the existing landscaping to be maintained. And there's quite a lot of significant trees and landscaping on the current building, which really has quite a big outlook for all the buildings around. I think one of the trees itself is over 20 metres, and so it's quite considerable. However, in the event that all of the objections that have been put forward with regards to bulk, scale and everything else are disregarded, and the building is to go ahead as the nature of a boarding house, we would just ask that the panel, be sympathetic and that the building be approved only on a condition of a maximum of 2 stories, not 3 stories as it is at the moment. We believe that while this would still have adverse effects to the privacy of neighbouring buildings, it would at least reduce the overall visual impact for all local buildings and the overshadowing of properties to the south. And also, in the event of approval, I guess we'd like to take this opportunity to request that the panel ensures that the maximum measures to limit dust, noise, traffic, etc. during the build and excavation are implemented. 30 seconds?
Yep.
So, because the majority of the local residents are people who are often home during the day, being, retirees, young families. Also, the junction outside the property is already very busy and it's quite dangerous. A lot of the time it's really highly trafficked from a pedestrian and a car point of view. I guess I'd like to finish that saying, but, while change is inevitable and the development is a natural part of living in a metro suburban area, I guess we ask at this point the panel to look beyond how this building ticks the boxes from a regulation point of view and considers the human factor of those who already live in the area. Some of our residents have been here a few months, others over 20 years, but are feeling the same, that the build isn't appropriate and it adds no value to the community.
Okay, thanks, Samantha.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else registered to speak. Is the applicant here? Do you wish to speak? You haven't registered? No? Right. Any questions from the objector at this stage? Yes, you can.
Hi.
Hi.
I just want to ask a question. Now, Anzac Parade is quite busy. It's quite a busy street, right?
Yeah.
So even when we were standing there, we could hear traffic noises. We saw cars drive past quickly. So I'm not saying that the boarding house noises made by humans will be less severe than traffic noises, but how heavy is it? How noisy is it already now for people who live alongside Anzac Parade? That's what I want to know. Are all your windows double glazed already?
I think I'm sort of set just back, so I can only speak from my townhouse. We do have single glazing. I think for the people that are along the front row, they get the traffic impact more. But I mean, at the moment, there's just 2 overground driveways, 1 for each existing property. And I think the new plans are for 18 additional car parking spaces plus motorbike spaces, which could obviously be used constantly. And I think with the sideways access, there would actually be noise that would affect more of the surrounding buildings than there currently are. But it's super busy. I mean, even because of the link cross to Murray Street and the bus stops on either side, it can be quite dangerous at times because traffic moves really fast along that road. So even from a pedestrian point of view, it's definitely not an ideal place to be adding an extra 50, 60 residents to that particular spot.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You wish to address the panel? Can I just, while you're coming, I just say that in future it might be useful if you do register to address the panel so that you're not losing that opportunity. You might have thought of the outcome that you didn't have to, but I think it's important to do that. You can always say no later. Just state your name, please.
My name is Huss Chalish from Pinnacle Plus.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies.
It's okay.
Afternoon, Chair, distinguished panel members. Frank, I'd just like to take this opportunity to alleviate a few public concerns regarding boarding houses as such. I think there's a misconception in the community with boarding houses that attracts a certain type of tenant that's from a low socio-demographic that causes trouble. It's not a hostel. Boarding houses have a minimum tenancy of 3 months or greater. It's been shown that most people that stay in boarding houses stay up to 18 months or greater. It's rent-controlled rent as part of SEP 2009. The planning policy is that it's affordable, and most people that are occupants of boarding houses come from the community or are actually public servants. With close proximity to Randwick Hospital, where a number of nurses and police officers, fire officers that get displaced from the country to serve, they actually go to this type of accommodation. We're moving more towards co-living and co-working spaces as a society, and boarding houses as such present that for people. So with workplaces like WeWork and WhatsApp having co-working spaces and other councils embracing co-living spaces, I think the misconception with boarding houses must be addressed, where it's a co-living space where it will add value to the community. We worked heavily with the likes of Frank and William Jones, and special mention to both, with open lines of communication back and forth to get this resolved, with exceeding the setbacks, landscaping, private open space and deep soil areas, which are more onerous than what the DCP and the SEP requirements are. We've managed to put 18 car spaces, which alleviates a need for on-street parking, with the future for light rail to come along Anzac Parade, which I think is an amazing solution to a heavily classified road. There is no solar concerns, there is no privacy concerns, there is no height concerns. We're well under the FSR. It is both compliant with Randwick's DCP controls and SEP 2008. That's all I have to say.
Questions from the panel?
I think I've got a theme going here. The floor-to-floor heights.
Yeah.
They're shown on the drawings as 2.9.
Yep.
And then I think you're suggesting that you're going to get 2.7
Yes.
floor to ceiling.
Correct.
In my experience, that's extremely hard to achieve. What are you going to do that's going to make it different to other projects, so that you do, because the boarding house rooms are so small, that floor to ceiling height is really important in terms of maximising amenity?
Absolutely. If you look at our floor plans, a lot of the boarding houses are stacked in a modular type design, which allows us to align the surfaces. As such, all the surfaces that are penetrated are going to line underneath the joinery, which will allow us to achieve the maximum ceiling height in the habitable areas, i.e. the living dining spaces as such will get 2.7 with a slab thickness of 150mm with 50mm for furring channel and plasterboard. So this has got preliminary advice from structural, and we're confident we can achieve this.
So there won't be a future modification application to increase the height?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
We can put that in the condition if you like.
Okay.
This has taken long enough.
And this is possibly a question for staff, which I think would be important for the audience to hear. We had a comment then that they would be controlled rent. That's not my understanding from the SEP. Are you able to confirm that, Mr. Ho?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. No, at the moment, they are not considered to be affordable housing, from council's perspective. And there's no way we can, impose the conditions to control the rent. So that's probably a misunderstanding of the boarding house allowable under the Affordable Housing Act.
Hi. My question just relates to, I guess, some of the contextual analysis that we noted when we were on the site visit, in terms of the proximity of the townhouses to really sort of in the northeast corner of the site. And I just noticed that there's a couple of them there that have balconies, and they are closer to the boundary than obviously what a current control would necessarily require. But you've got on that side your communal room, and it looks like on the northern facade of the communal room that there's three small, almost like slat windows, and then the main doors from the communal room to the east, to the rear yard. But on the landscape plan, that area just to the north of that space has a pergola structure that's proposed there. And then I noticed in the council report that it talks about, from an operational perspective, an operational plan and management, where it talks about not playing music in that room after 10 p.m. at night. I'm just wondering how much further that could possibly go, just in terms of recognising the use of that common room and the outdoor area, including the pergola adjoining it. If there would be any opportunity to restrict the use of that after a certain period in the evening, so that you don't have people out there talking for a long period of time, or even the music playing that from the room that interferes with the amenity of those townhouses that are located in close proximity.
Sure. I'm pretty sure there's a plan of management that
Yeah, there
addresses
is.
and restricts the hours. Because this boarding house has more than 20 rooms, a manager has to be appointed.
Yeah.
So the manager will enforce that plan of management, and that community room will be closed from those hours as such. Furthermore, I think you're alluding to the plans prepared by Concept Landscape Architects. That's correct. So those plans were thoughtfully thought out to try to zone the traffic and the noise and have hubs where people don't congregate in one section. And I think in the condition of consent, the manager needs to have a fence erected to maintain his 8 square metres of private open space.
Yeah, no, I did notice that.
Yep.
Would you have any objection if that landscape area on the northern side, where the proposed pergola is, so as you turn the corner around, the common area was not used after 8 p.m. at night or something like that to stop people?
I'd
from
have no
being-
objection with that condition.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much
Thank you for your time.
response,
Thank you, Frank.
and we'll certainly will take account of what you've put to us and what Samantha has put to us on behalf of the community. Thank you. The next matter is 30 to 32 Glebe Street. Again, we have some speakers registered to speak. Firstly, Councillor Kathy Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair and members of the panel. I'm Councillor Kathy Nielsen. I must respectfully disagree with the recommendations as put to you in the business paper. Many Randwick residents fought very hard to prevent the overdevelopment of Glebe Gully and the surrounding streets. Glebe Gully is now known as Fred Hollow's Reserve, and Fred was such a strong defender of this cause, we used to meet in his house. I venture to say if he was still alive, he would be here today objecting to the demolition of this fine house. Defending the heritage, Defending the heritage of the city of Randwick has been a very strong interest of mine, and many years ago I was community representative on the Heritage and Urban Design Urban Form Advisory Group as part of the Randwick City-wide Strategic Plan consultation. And looking back through my papers stored in an old filing cabinet, I came across this image which shows 30 to 32 Glebe Street as a potential heritage item, along with other potential sites on Glebe Street in the Randwick Heritage and Visual Character Study Stage 1 report, dated March 2001, prepared by Godden Mackey Logan and the Urban Design Advisory Service of the then Department of Urban Affairs and Planning. The study was commissioned by Randwick Council to inform the preparation of a long-term strategic plan to review the Randwick LEP 1998. Unfortunately, at the council meeting on the 13th of December, a bit of an ominous date we must say, 2005, Council resolved not to approve and not to proceed on a draft LEP that had been prepared in order to implement the recommendations contained in the Randwick Heritage and Visual Character Study. I would strongly contend that these same sites on Glebe Street should have been listed as heritage items. Entering Glebe Street, you would have seen two houses. This is number 34, and then we get to the property in question, 32 to 30. And they are providing a very pleasant and positive appearance to the streetscape. And in this instance, note the sandstone curbing, an indication of the age of these buildings. Entering the grounds of the property, we see that the subject site contains an old but large single-storey Federation bungalow building that has been altered during the interwar period, but still contains a very strong fabric of the original building. This slide shows a southern side external view of the house, which you would have seen. And this picture is of the southern side of the dwelling viewed from the rear towards the front, showing the brickwork and attractive fenestration and stone veranda. Approaching up the path to the front door, and approaching the front door, we see the characteristic brickwork of the Federation era. And the veranda again, probably this section is more typical of the interwar period. An interior photo showing a corner seat, which was a very popular feature of houses in the 1920s. I'm not disputing that the house has been altered over time, but I would strongly argue that it still contains so many attributes which mean that it contributes to the heritage of this area, that is the St Mark's Glebe estate. And I would respectfully ask that the panel, may I have an extension, please? Thank you, Chair. That the, I'm not disputing that the house has been altered over time, but I would strongly argue that it still contains so many attributes which mean that if contributes to the heritage of this area, i.e. the St Mark's Glebe estate, and I would respectfully ask that the panel refuse permission for the demolition of this dwelling. I would argue that the subject site is located, if not strictly within a conservation area, it deserves to be, and the dwelling should be retained on heritage grounds. Certainly further investigation should be undertaken to save this house and the buildings along the street. It is crucially important that we maintain our city's heritage as it keeps us connected with our past and our communities retain a sense of identity, pride and history. If the panel cannot grant refusal, I would respectfully ask for a deferral so that further evidence can be provided to provide the necessary evidence to save this property. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. There may be some questions after we've heard from others speaking today. Thank you. We now have an objector registered to speak, Robin George.
Good afternoon. I'll just turn. Oh, sorry, there. Panel Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the proposal at 30 Glebe Street, Randwick. I would like to reaffirm my objections to the proposal based on the heritage and design grounds. While I appreciate the information provided by the Council's Local Planning Panel, I strongly object to the findings and recommendation. The proposed development will have a significant and intolerable impact on the character, aesthetic, livability and our street with the broader community. We are a strong, tight-knit and progressive community. Some of us, including myself, have lived in the area for more than 40 years. I'm actually the resident next door at 34 Glebe Street. To be clear, I am an advocate for both progress and clear conditions of approval. However, this progress should not be made at the cost of historical worth and community sentiment. As a collective community, we strongly object to the proposed design, which I believe has been made evident in all our objections. Each decision carries with it a sense of what could have been. In supporting the recommendations to approve the development, Council will not be afforded the opportunity to recapture history and reaffirm existing community culture and demonstrate responsiveness to the voice of landowners. The proposal will increase traffic congestion. From our local perspective, the addition of a multi-dwelling building on Glebe Street would place unjustifiable pressure on the existing streets. The proposal has not been described accurately, in our opinion. Throughout the business paper, Council inaccurately refers to the proposed building as a 3-storey structure of 10.5 metres in height. The structure should be considered as consisting of 4 storeys at 11.9 metres in height, inclusive of a 3-metre semi-basement car park, which is higher than ground level and not included in the height of the building. It will mean the structure will rise to a height of 14 metres above Glebe Street and the residents of 26 to 28 Glebe Street. I ask that the panel, or more than 14 metres, possibly 15 metres, I ask that the panel consider these inaccuracies and reflect on the impact an approval would have on the existing conditions, including egress and ingress requirements, local parking, waste removal requirements and increased foot traffic. Consideration should also be given to the severe impacts any proposal and construction work would have on the existing conditions, including noise and dust emissions, as well as the significant increase in vehicular movements. Just very quickly, I'd like another minute, please.
Sure.
The proposal will result in lack of consideration for the existing neighbours. There's going to be a restricted solar access to both our property on the south and to the west, and a lot of residents in the buildings to the west are vulnerable people in low-cost housing, and I think the lack of solar access could actually affect their mental health, and we strongly oppose that, as well as the effect of a very tall building on the look of the streetscape, which is actually positioned from the highest point of Glebe Street. It will impact. The writer of the council document suggested that the current resident of 34 Glebe Street will move as a result of this proposal, which is preposterous. And I think there's a lack of procedural fairness because the rights of the developer seem to hold precedence over the existing residents. The developer has the full backing of council and the residents have, oh dear, I'm sorry about this. The residents have been dismissed. The proposal will result in heritage impacts for all of us in the area, and in my research I discovered that Richard Moody was in fact a renowned heritage builder architect who designed both 34 Glebe Street and 30 Glebe Street.
Thank you. We may have some questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Gary Shields, on behalf of the applicant.
Chairman, panel, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name's Gary Shields from GSA Planning. There's a very important backstory to this application, and I'd like to share it with you if I may. We had 3 meetings with council before we lodged this development application. The dilemma we had was, which side do we put the driveway? Do we follow normal routines and put it on the lowest part of the site, which might have meant the fig tree going? Or do we put it on the higher part of the site to the north and keep the fig tree? The unanimous decision from the council officers and indeed from the Design Excellence Committee was keep the tree and we'll look at the non-compliance. That is basically the only non-compliance that we have. We satisfy the height, we satisfy the floor space ratio, and by satisfying the height and the floor space ratio, I put to you that this development, notwithstanding what the good councillor has said, is not an overdevelopment. It's been said that this application involves a demolition of a building that should be kept. Council's looked at this and has previously decided not to keep it. We've put forward 4 heritage reports, and as the councillor properly points out, it's been substantially altered. Although we've submitted 4 heritage reports, there's only 3 that have actually made their way into the report, but I assure you that there's 4 that justify the removal of this building. Indeed, the council's independent assessment suggests that this building can be demolished, and indeed satisfies the council's desired future character for this area. This is zoned for medium density. If you want to keep that building, you don't zone it for medium density. This will provide for 6 dwellings. It'll provide accommodation in Randwick. It'll satisfy the car parking, and it gets a particularly good write-up from the Design Excellence Panel, who said the proposals are a well-considered scheme that will make a positive addition to its neighbourhood, and it'll provide a high level of amenity for its future residents. Important consideration. I suggested that there is a wall height non-compliance, and because of the fall of the site towards the southwestern corner, there is that non-compliance. Panel, the council officers have addressed that quite in detail, and if I take you to page 184, you'll see where the wall height's considered acceptable by the council officers, and they go through a series of points why they've formed a view that it is acceptable.
Any extension?
Just a few seconds,
Yes.
if I may.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that this is a well-considered scheme that hasn't been put together on a wing and a prayer. It's been dealt with through careful consultation with council officers, with the Design Excellence Panel, and in our view satisfies all of the relevant controls, indeed the objectives. And my final comment is that in the conclusion of this report, you will note that the council officers have also formed that view, that it's an acceptable design and an acceptable project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the panel? Yes, you can go for a question, yes.
Good afternoon. I wasn't sure if I should ask this, but I do want to ask this question.
Please.
When we buy a house with the intention of knocking it down, we won't go, I mean, normally people would then look for a house that is dilapidated or in an environment that requires that. But this house was purchased last year at a rather decent sum. And it is a solid house, it's beautifully, whether it still has the original design or not, but it's a beautiful house. It's a great family house. And I just find it hard to understand buying such a beautiful house to knock it down. This is my issue here. I understand that it doesn't fit all the criteria to be listed as a heritage item, and it is not in the conservation area. I understand all this, and they're all justifiable, but
Is there a question there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, yes, why was a family house bought with the intention of demolition? A house that is solid and sound? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Chairman, I think the simple answer to that is that the council, when it did its planning for this area, concluded, after all the research, strategic work that it did, that this particular area should be zoned for medium density. This council determined that it should have a height limit of 12 metres and that residential flat buildings were suited for this location. There's currently a dwelling on the site, regardless of what you think the merits are of that dwelling. There's a dwelling on this site which is capable of being replaced by 6 dwellings. And I would say respectfully, that's probably the primary reason why it was purchased.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. I have a question, Councillor Nielsen. I'm just, Council's obviously considered this before as part of your strategic planning and reviews. Why, I don't know whether you can help throw any insight for the panel as to why Council chose to make the decision they did. Was that back in 2012?
It was earlier than that.
Earlier than that?
Chair. Yeah. I think it was a case, if my memory serves me correct, and I was just a resident, an interested resident. It was that the council at that time lost its nerve, in the sense of rather than they just didn't go ahead with a lot of things that they should have gone ahead with, and for whatever reason we haven't gone back to address some of these particular issues. All these heritage items. And I guess to follow on the point that your colleague beside you made, we always think that a house that's in good condition is going to withstand the onslaught of development, and that the street itself, Glebe Street, I mean the name itself is resonating with why is it called Glebe Street? Well, it's called Glebe Street because it's a Mark's Glebe. And those buildings that are already there, those flats that were already also identified as potential heritage sites, it does have grounds, I would have thought, for the area as it stands now to be a heritage character area. There might be other concerns too. I think it was Toga who brought the development behind and things changed, yeah.
So you weren't a councillor when all those decisions were made?
No, I was just a resident.
Yeah, sure. What's the mechanism for council to reconsider?
I think you probably have to confirm with the officers because they're more across the protocol. But I would have thought that if you asked us to address whether this could be redetermined and listed as a heritage item, and the other ones on the street, you know, the blocks of flats that are also worthy of retention. And if we were to look through a bit more of the Church of England church records, if someone's got the time and interest to do that, I think that the council could come forward with strong grounds for retention.
I would presume, and please, I'm not, this line of questioning is only to help me.
Yeah, sure.
There's been an extensive investigation done by your council heritage officer who's gone back into a lot of that history. I'm just wondering what sort of extra evidence could be produced?
Well, for example, Chair, they did in one of the reports say that more information could be achieved if they were to look through the Church of England church records. I can't remember whose report that was, but I did note that. And also the man who was living in the place at the time. I think that the name rang a bell with me. I have to apologise that my mother died just a couple of weeks ago, so instead of being able to focus on this, I was, you know,
distracted,
focused on
exactly.
And so I apologise about that, but that was why I was so amazed, because in my mind we were saving the street, so that's why I was so pleased to find that my memory was serving me right. And sometimes it pays to be a hoarder, because then I came across that map that was a little bit hard to read, but I hope you managed to see on the map and see the potential sites that were identified. And the man, I just forget his name, who was living there, no, he was the architect. Then there's another man who was living there for quite some time. The name rang a bell with me, but I would have to go. Sorry?
Which date is that?
Well, it was before the Forsters.
Yeah, look, I understand.
I think we would be able to find out more about, because the name rang a bell with me as like, it's a name of a chemist in our area. That's how the name triggered.
Sure. Okay. What
But
sort of
whether it's the same
timescale would be
person.
envisaged if this investigation was to be taken? I'm not saying that's the course that the panel may take, but I'm just making my own self fully aware.
I would think a 3-month period maximum.
Okay. Further questions from the panel? No? Yes?
Again, I'm not sure if you will recall this, but you've talked about when council considered potentially the listing of this property and some the other couple of properties in close proximity as heritage items in a former study. Did it consider that both in terms of potential listing and or not listing, but any extension to the existing conservation areas or any new conservation area dealing with? And we know that there's a lot of different styles in that area, but there's, I guess, in the pocket that it's in, you've mentioned that the contribution in terms of the streetscape and character. So did that study only look at potential listing, or did it look at all or potential heritage conservation areas or extension of existing ones?
It was a pretty bold exercise, I've got to say, but it wasn't completed. So that was the stage that they got to at that particular point, and they were envisaging going further with the research. And at that time, I think that they could have come up with more. And I certainly would dispute a lot of the claims that the changes that were made inside the house don't still, that's why I showed that corner seat and so on. I mean, it's the house itself still has a lot of characteristics that show you a house that people have lived in and lived in comfortably over a considerable period of time, which still shows the grace and not quite elegance, because I wouldn't say you would call it an elegant house, but it shows like upper middle class, I suppose, comfortable living. You can imagine someone with a tray-mobile, you know, bringing the food from the kitchen to the dining room. But then that's gone on to be a very comfortable living space for people with young children. You can see the swing on the tree and all that sort of thing. It's and the amount of land that it has around the place as well.
I've got one further question just relating to the change in the controls. So as we heard that there was a decision was made some years ago to rezone And we looked at our pre-meeting at the former zoning plan for the area, which showed I think there were 3 properties, including the 2 houses and one adjoining the apartment building that were previously zoned. I think it was R2 or low density. It was called something else at the time. Consistent with the housing on the other side of the road, and that then these sites were rezoned to the medium density R3 zone, which Mr. Shields talked about. Did that occur while you were on council? Do you recall
No, I wasn't on
that
council.
discussion or?
No, I would have been a resident at that time.
Do you recall even the local community's response to that at the time, at the strategic planning process, in terms of the change from it being low density to medium density?
Well, people weren't happy, but it's sort of a bit of a reality because there are flats on the street. So, but I think what people were envisaging was that you keep flats that are well built, can accommodate a number of families and people within the floor plan of those old-fashioned flats, and you've still got houses. So it was really sort of accepting what the status quo was in a way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Look, thank you everybody for your contribution today. Oh, sorry, you got.
Oh, that was. Do we get to ask a question of the Miss George?
If you want to, yeah. Robert George, yes.
Sorry, we ran through all these questions first. It's okay. We heard from you a very comprehensive submission that looked at, I guess, the whole community and the impact on the broader community, heritage, etc. What I'm interested in is also, in addition to that, is the direct impact on your property, which you indicated you're the adjoining property to the south. I've got questions in relation to the solar access impacts and broader amenity impacts on your individual property, privacy and solar access in particular. But just in terms of solar, the shadow diagrams show that the northern elevation of your property will basically, there's 4 windows all in a row, and then there's one that's further set back, but they will be overshadowed where they're not currently overshadowed. What's the use of those rooms at the moment?
There is a big living space on the western section of our house, facing north, and we're not going to have any sunlight in there at all. And along the side of the house, on the northern side, we have 2 bathrooms, a bedroom and a study. And so we're going to lose a substantial amount of solar access. And I'd like to point out that the residents behind our property, there are 34 residents living there. They're going to lose all their solar access along that eastern front of their building. And yes, it's going to impact on us considerably. We'll probably have more mould, gardens might die, and mental health issues could arise from this lack of solar access. So it's a considerable problem. But I'd like to point out, if I may, that I have done a lot of research on the property. I failed to get to that point in my discussion. I did a lot of research about the property, and the fact that it belonged to the church made it very difficult to access information. However, at the Land and Titles Office, I discovered the actual owners. So some of the references in the council document are inaccurate. And I found out the actual builder of the property and the history of the property. He was a substantial builder in the early part of the 1900s, and I've discovered that he actually built 14 heritage listed properties in Sydney. And I think he's worthy of more research, definitely, to protect this house. And there's an element of history in our neighbourhood that needs to be protected. It's a very unique area in Randwick, and there are some beautiful properties just around about. So apart from the fact that it's going to be a very tall building, I'd like to say it's going to be a hybrid amongst the other beautiful turn-of-the-century buildings in our street.
Thank you.
I have a lot of material which I'll hand over to you as a panel to look at if you're interested. I've got all the evidence to support that the builder, the owner, was a reputable person who did actually build this property, which has been disputed.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that,
Thank you.
Okay, look, thank you. Mr. Shields, could you like to just come to the microphone, please? Sorry.
Sorry, Chair,
That's all
but I think it's important just to respond to a couple of points that have been made. I won't address heritage because it's been dealt with in some detail in all the reports, but I would, for Ms Cranston's benefit, address your attention to pages 168 and 171 in the Council Officer's report. I think that appropriately deals with the overshadowing likely to occur to number 34. And that's all I will say, sir.
Okay, sure. Thank you. The panel will obviously give very serious consideration to all the points that have been raised today. It is a matter that obviously is of concern to a lot of people, and we will certainly give it our attention. The next matter is for DA at 101 Eastern Avenue, Kingston. We have objector Mr John Cotterill to speak. I just have to press the button. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bit nervous, but here I go. I'm representing the neighbours who lodged their concerns about the building application for 101 Eastern Avenue, Kingsford. These residents are excellent community people who have made Eastern Avenue their home. Thank you, Council, for refusing the application. Our community group appreciates the decision. I'm going to read a part of the submission lodged by one of the neighbourhood group as it states aspects of the situation in a clear manner. Quoting from the resident goes like this: compliance, regulation and rules are part of who we are, how we live in harmony as individuals and as a community. Southern Courier advised recently that non-compliance is happening on a greater scale in the area of Kensington and Kingsford. The ongoing operation of a boarding house or Airbnb without an owner living on the premises is a concern to local residents. This raises issues such as lack of direct responsibility, monitoring and potential impact of parking, fire, garbage issues, etc. I've added this to the point. Also, disputes between unsupervised stayers that turn violent will have no supervision. If, for instance, at any one time there are 10 occupants in the 5 bedrooms, are they covered by fire regulations? I have viewed the submission and floor plans of the DA application online. The floor plan showed 3 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bedrooms downstairs. Potentially the study, living room and storage building could also be 2 bedrooms. This is a total of 7 possible bedrooms for individuals and or groups entering 3 entry access points into a house and 1 adjacent storage building. The idea that this DA has to be formalised for non-approved work does not done over the previous 2 years and continues to operate as a boarding house Airbnb is concerning. This is only a part of the bigger issue, it seems to me. What is evolving here in Eastern Avenue is an example of local residents forced to raise the issue of a variety of reasons with council and now having to protect and defend established regulations by asking council to enforce them in the light of individuals who seek to flout the rules by non-compliance. Parking. The tandem parking situation suggested in this application works okay in a cooperative family environment. The idea that two separate parties unknown to each other in an Airbnb environment parked in tandem is not workable. I'm nearly finished.
Extension of granted.
Yes, please.
1 minute.
I'm nearly finished. There is no sufficient parking for the premises to operate as a boarding house or Airbnb. She also includes this point. Earlier in the year, a car was left outside 101 Eastern Avenue. It remained there for 12 weeks. It then attracted 2 instances of vandals attempting to strip the vehicle. Consensus was that the Airbnb resident had left the country and the vehicle. We did not hear anything further to the contrary. The vehicle was removed by Randwick Council. I will end by asking the following. Imagine the situation of 99 Eastern Avenue. They open their front door to the washing that is hanging on a fixed line. Would this be acceptable if you were the neighbour? Thank you for the opportunity to address council.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification, the recommendation from the council is for refusal. The council hasn't yet refused it.
Yes, it is refused.
This panel is the consent authority.
For refusing the application.
Yeah, recommending refusing.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, that's not an issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a representative of the applicant here today? No? Okay, any questions of Mr. Cottrell? No. Thank you very much for your submission. Thank you. The next matter for the panel is 171 Todman Avenue. We have the applicant, Mr. Michael Munro. I have no objectors registered to address the panel.
Thank you, Michael Munro. I'm the architect and the applicant on this application. It follows about 13 months of meetings and amendments, and we're okay with the recommendation, of course. So it was only really if there was a question.
Okay, I think there's probably are some questions. Yep.
Good afternoon. I have a question. We received an objection from 9 units of 83 Doncaster Avenue.
Yes.
It concerns about the parking area of the site building, of your building, as well as the bins. We were there today and I saw how the bins were just lined up in free air. So is it possible you think that a small structure can be built to cover those bins, put them in a kind of like lockable? The
Well, I
garbage
must say
bins.
that's never been raised with us, but I don't see any reason we couldn't put them in an enclosure, no.
Okay, good, thank you.
Another point that was made was there is a removal of a tree right in the back of that particular area that is regarded as a weed.
Yes.
Would there be any objection to the panel looking at maybe a 500 soil for planting of shrubbery along that back fence area, just to soften that? Is that an issue?
I think there is planting, there is a landscape
Okay, I'll
plan
have
with
to
the application
revisit that, yeah.
for all of that area, but my understanding is the tree, in fact, I think the report recommends we take it out.
Yes,
But,
that's right. No, I
we
agree.
wouldn't have a problem doing
No,
that, but
but-
if we were to do that, we'd put something back in
Yeah,
its
sure.
place.
Okay then, thank you. Other questions from the panel?
Sorry, I think what the chair was suggesting was a landscape strip along the full length, not because the landscape plan. I think we probably as a panel need to talk about it, but the landscape drawing that you're referring to shows planting at that corner where the existing
In that
tree
existing
is,
area, yes.
but then the existing parking retained. Is there any room for planting behind the existing parking?
There is, yeah.
Noting that the addition is cantilevered, so you should have sufficient space for manoeuvring cars.
All we did was we left the car parking that was there,
Yep.
but we have no problem moving it a metre or half a metre away to allow planting on that boundary. In fact, it would probably help us because that fence is pretty unsightly.
Right. And the only other question I had was one of the new units has a balcony, a 6 metre squared balcony that's going to end up quite close to the adjoining balconies. And you've got, I think you've got privacy louvers on the western side. Obviously, you don't want to enclose the whole thing because it's not going to have very nice amenity. But did you look at the privacy relationship? We don't have a site plan that shows the position of that adjoining building. Did you look at the relationship of that balcony and the balcony to the south?
You're talking about the south, that's the building on Doncaster,
Yes.
the big block of flats there. We did, but the separation distance is the compliant. If you're on site, or you've been on site, I know,
Yes.
but I'm sure you didn't get up into the building. It's difficult to see over the fence to the balconies and private open space of the ones in the building at the rear. But we're set back the SEP 65 control, which was 6 metres. They're not.
Yeah.
So it's hard for us to compensate for them, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. Good point.
In fact, we're in this case, we're nearly 7 metres, but
Okay.
Just on that same issue, would you have any objection to a movable privacy screen on that southern side of that balcony, so it's not completely
No, we
enclosed,
don't.
but there could be still retention of some privacy between the two?
we don't have a problem with that at all.
Thank you.
Okay, look, I think some of us were actually on the panel that considered this last year, and obviously this is a considerable change to that, and we'll give it our most earnest consideration. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
One more matter that the panel will consider is 22 to 84, 86 Bream Street, Coogee. There's nobody registered to speak to the panel on that matter. We will consider that in our deliberations this afternoon. We've heard from all the registered speakers, and in accordance with the panel guidelines, this public meeting will now be closed, and the panel will move to another room to deliberate and vote on each of the matters. We won't return to the room, however, the chambers today, but the outcomes from the voting and the determination will be made through Council's website, either later tonight or tomorrow, and the audio recording will be available through Council's website as well. Thank you very much to my panel colleagues. Thank you to the Council staff for your assistance and for all those who made submissions to us today. Declare the meeting closed.